here with Priya Narang. Priya, you're a font of innovation and refinement, and today you're going to be showing us more cool stuff. But let's sort of set the stage here. So you gave a wonderful talk, a demonstration of a modification to the Yamani technique. For those viewers who don't know what it is, please explain what the Yamani technique is and why it needed modifying.
Thank you, Josh, for having me here. You're absolutely right. We are going to discuss the modification in the Yamani technique. The secondary IOL fixation is a thing which is catching on with people, especially handling complicated cases and all. So in the Yamani technique, many surgeons we came across, they do have some issues with the haptic externalization and things like that. So we came up with one of the modification that I have come up with is, and we call this as a handshake riveting flange technique. Especially the limitations that we have with the Yamani was that we had to use the TSK needle, the 30 gauge needle, and the specified intraocular lenses with the PVDF haptics, which are not available globally. So surgeons, they used to struggle with docking the haptics into the needle lumen and things like that, and they would end up with some of the complications with the haptics. So what we have tried to do is that we have tried to use the sensor 3-piece intraocular lens, the 40 AR, which is commonly available globally, and we try to use that with a 26 gauge needle for docking and externalization, and then we flange it off and we rivet it so that it does not slip back inside. So now into this technique, the modification was that, all the surgeons who are venturing into doing a Yamani and you do not have a 30 gauge needle, that cannot pose as a limitation to you, and specifically the intraocular lens also does not pose any limitation to you.
Now, this would be a very difficult thing to describe, but you as usual, had the foresight to bring some descriptive video that I'm going to ask you to narrate for us. Can we bring that video up? I'm eager to see what Priya's brought.
This is for understanding for the audience who are trying to venture into this. So the initial steps are just as similar to what we do in Yamani at a distance of 2 millimeters from the limbus. We go ahead and with a 26 gauge needle, and you see the leading haptic has been externalized by docking it. Now what we do is, after creating a flange, we are just compressing this with the help of with the needle holder, So what actually is happening is this is being riveted. So this actually prevents the slippage of the haptic inside the eye. The similar procedure is then adopted for the trailing haptic. Now the advantage with this method is that, when you are flanging and riveting the haptic simultaneously, the haptics, they do not tend to slip back. This is the clinical situation which will probably help to explain things in a better way. So when you see this case, you will understand that when the 26 gauge needle is now being docked inside, we just take a 3-piece AR40 lens. We have no financial disclosures here. So we take up that, and which is very commonly available, and this passes very easily through the 26 gauge needle. The second issue that can happen with this is that, the intrascleral tract that is created with the 26 gauge needle is comparatively wider than what is being used with the 27 or with the 30 gauge needle. So when you are actually compressing the haptics and you are making a rivet out of it, it prevents the intraocular migration of the haptic, whether it's a trailing or a leading haptic. So now, as we have seen that, this is a leading haptic which has come out and the flange is being created, and now it is compressed. So this in no way tends to slip back inside the eye. And the second thing is that we just push this back again inside into the scleral tunnel. So the trailing haptic again comes back to its original position, and there is no twisting of the trailing haptic. The handshake technique which has been described for gluteal is then adopted for the trailing haptic, and you can see the surgeon is comfortably holding the trailing haptic. Meanwhile, the 26 gauge needle from the other side enters inside as we do in a Yamane, and the trailing haptic is then docked, and it is now being externalized in this case. Now once this trailing haptic is again out, again the same procedure is adopted. Riveting idea, we got it from one of the iridodialysis procedure where Dr. Kusaka et al. They had described riveting the sutures for iridodialysis fixation. So we probably adopted this from there for the flanges, and this works beautifully, and you do not have any limitation into doing this procedure. It's neither the needle nor the intraocular lens, and the technique also becomes much more easier for the surgeon, because the manipulation of the trailing haptic is not there. So this is how it actually works, and we call this as a handshake riveting. This is the anterior segment OCT, which shows very well tucked haptic into the tunnel.
Priya, that was really, really great. Now, I've sort of learned my lesson from you, because your videos make things look really, really easy, and then it turns out that they're very challenging, and you're just very skilled. How hard is this new? I mean, the famous last words. It doesn't look that hard, the riveting portion of the procedure.
Yeah. It's not at all very difficult. The most difficult aspect that all the surgeons they come across is when they are handling the trailing haptic. So that becomes much more similar, because once you have riveted the leading haptic, you just push it into the intrascleral tract. So your trailing haptic again comes back to the corneal incision, and then it is easier for you to manipulate the trailing haptic also into the 26 gauge needle, which comes from the other side. So it prevents the clockwise anticlockwise rotation of the haptic, and the surgeons they find it quite easy. The maneuverability becomes quite easy.
And it's not a problem getting things buried, getting things lodged into the sort of scleral tract.
No, it's not at all difficult, because that's what I was saying, that the intrascleral tract which is created by a 26 gauge needle is comparatively wider as compared to what is done with the other needles like a 30 gauge or a 27 gauge, which many of the surgeons are using. But the rivet that we do, that is when we compress it, it prevents any slippage of the haptic inside. So if you're only making a flange, it will slip inside. But when you rivet it and you compress it, so it increases the surface area and it holds the haptic onto the intrascleral wall.
Really, really, really interesting. And it doesn't, I mean, in your, I guess there's no way to judge this, but it doesn't make the haptic mechanically sort of more brittle or more fragile.
No, we haven't come across that.
Yeah. But this is really, really great stuff, innovative stuff. I don't know how you think about all of these new things. Every meeting you come with something new, but that's you, Priya. So this is really, really, really wonderful stuff. I'm delighted that you shared it with us. That you brought such a wonderful video that was very, very smart thinking. Particularly since we're airing this video live, and you were just right on top of things. Priya, I want to thank you very much, as always, for the generosity of the time that you spend with us.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank iWorld and Josh for this. Thank you.